It's almost like Trump knows what he's doing. Crazy, huh? So check this out from Reuters. EU prepared to accept a flat 10% U.S. tariffs. With conditions, they say. Okay. Brussels, let me get rid of this guy here if I can. Brussels negotiators hope that offering to accept U.S. tariffs on 10% across all the EU's exports into the U.S. will avert any higher duties on cars, drugs, and electronics. Interesting. So they're saying, look, we'll accept 10%, but don't put any more on there, please, Donald Trump, please. The paper said the offer to the U.S. counterparts would come only under certain conditions and not billed as permanent. Yeah, they're going to try to not bill as permanent because they're hoping that Trump loses his next term. He's not going to, because he's going to run for another term. He'll get 3 terms, and J.D. Vance will get 2. So the EU's going to have to deal with the MAGA movement for another 12 years. Crazy. The paper said the EU was in turn ready to cut its tariffs on U.S.-made vehicles and to possibly change technical or legal hurdles to make it easier for the U.S. to sell their cars in Europe. It's almost like Trump's winning. Check this out. The EU is a top U.S. trading partner. All right. So the EU exports to us $606 billion. They import from us $370 billion. So they export a hell of a lot more than they import. For every $60 they export to us, they only take $40 in. Mexico, $506 billion is exported to the United States, and only $334 billion comes from us. Canada is about half and half, close to half, pretty close. But look at China. $439 billion they export to us, and they only get $144 billion from us. Look at Vietnam and Taiwan, Japan. That's not good. You can't have an import solely economy. As you shouldn't have an export only economy, but you can't have an import only economy. You have to be able to export stuff, dude. The EU has offered to completely ban the purchases of Russian natural gas. I wonder why that'd be. Because the U.S. is stepping up our natural gas production under Trump, because Biden said we're going to ban our exports. Idiots, dude. These guys are idiots. So we're saying, no, we want you to buy our natural gas because it does exports, creates jobs for the United States, and good high-paying jobs too. That's what Trump knew. For some reason, Biden didn't know that. I don't understand. And the EU, of course, say, we don't want Russian natural gas. They're evil. Putin is a freaking dictator, blah, 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 blah. It's like, how are you going to pay for your electricity there, guy? You shut down your nuclear, other than France. You don't like any hydro. Hydro. You don't like any freaking fossil fuels. How are you going to get paid for it? Well, that's why the European Union has the highest electricity rates in the world, because they're stupid. The EU's position comes partly from the realization that President Trump rely on tariff revenues to fund planned tax cuts. Yep. U.S. negotiators have yet not agreed to limit their import duties to 10%. Remember, that's 10% above what it already is. And the EU's like, please, 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 just take 10%. We'll let you have more access to our countries. So check this out. This is very, very interesting. May inflation data lower than expected. May tariff revenues reach record highs. Interesting. The headline is written to draw the contrast from what the professional punditry class would say. That they say, the tariffs, inflation is something. Because remember, have you read the headlines about the May inflation numbers? I was like, dude, the May inflation numbers are way lower than was anticipated. Right here. So the U.S. tariff and excise tax revenue, 2017 to 2025. Here we are, $71 billion in tariff revenue so far, 2025. Right there, U.S. tariff and excise revenue. Interesting. Look at that. U.S. has brought in $71 billion in revenue from gross tariff and certain other excise tax in 2025. Billions above the level in recent years. Here we are in 2024, way the hell down there. That's the amount of revenue we're bringing in from tariffs. That's got to be inflationary, right, Josh? Oh, no. U.S. CPI right there. Not inflationary. CPI is going down. Kind of crazy. Do we have mass tariffs here? No. Tariffs. Interesting. Then if we go back to the bucket strategy, this is Daniel Kuhlberg's 55e.co, And we're going to show you, we're going to go back to the times we had tariffs. Let's take a look. 1890, tariffs, no inflation to speak of. Oops. Yeah, it's right there. No inflation. 1897, tariffs, no inflation. 1922, tariffs, no inflation. 1930, tariffs, no inflation. Kind of weird. We're going to get extra revenue. We're going to increase our manufacturing. We just heard that GM and other companies are opening more and more places in the United States to move manufacturing here, so it can be tariff-free. Increase jobs, increase manufacturing, increase self-sufficiency, increase revenue from tariffs, because everyone's like, how are you going to pay for tax cuts? Well, increase the tariff revenue, pay for the tax cuts. If we have to pay for it. That's weird. I always say how do you pay for tax cuts, but never say how do you pay for the Department of Education spending. No one ever says that. It's almost like Trump knew what he's doing. He's like maybe a student of history, economic history, unlike many of the mainstream political and economic punditry. Tariffs are inflationary. Where's the evidence, dude? Where? All right. God bless. I love your thoughts. Smash that like button.